Okay, we'll call to order our regular meeting of council. We'll start by acknowledging and appreciating that we're holding our meeting today on the unceded traditional territories of the Sishat and Hupachesset First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items from councillors? Seeing none, any late items from our corporate officer?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have one late item, Councillor Haggard's report under item L1.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move approval of our agenda with the addition of the late item? Moved by Councillor Patola, seconded by Councillor Solda. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And on minutes, we have the minutes from the special meeting held at noon and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on May 8th, 2023, as well as the minutes from the special meeting held at 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m. on May 15th, 2023. Move to adopt by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Dame. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. We'll move on to public input period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to City Council, and we will take up to 4 speakers for 3 minutes each. Would any members of the public like to speak today? Mr. Anderson. Correct. 3 minutes. We haven't passed changes to our procedures bylaw yet, so if you could just turn your microphone on as well. Thanks.
Sure. On the May 15th meeting, special meeting, I presented some concerns, not concerns, but for information regarding why the washrooms were closed, and those questions were answered. And the extent of the security renos to the building, I was never aware of just to what extent we were renovating for the sake of security. And what threats were the city experiencing, both from the public meetings here and from the general public who may be writing in? And I just wanted to understand, because those are serious offenses and they should never happen. So that was part of my reasoning, as also as gathering information. The mayor at that meeting, Mayor Minions, you had mentioned that we weren't talking about people coming to the podium as a perceived threat, and I think it was Councillor Haggard says, not you. Well, I'm not concerned about whether it's me or not. And then you passed it on to our CEO, and he talked about other communities that are having problems, growing concerns in Canada, not imminent in Port Alberni to a major extent, and they're glad he hasn't been seeing any incidents in Port Alberni, and talked about prevention is always something we should be looking at, and I agree with that aspect. Now, no member of the council at that time responded to the report as to their own personal experiences. However, and the reason I asked again, I said I was concerned not only, but if anyone is being threatened, there's the RCMP, and I understand recently that they had been informed of whatever. And so I was hoping that this would encourage some dialogue from more than just the mayor and Mr. Fox from the council as to what they experienced and why. I thought that this is a place to talk about these things. The public should be aware. And then 2 days later, I read in the local paper, and if I may read it, quote, Councillor Debbie Haggard said that in the past, members of the public have abused the public input period. There has been instances where the people have used the public input period to try and move forward their political agendas, such as during COVID. She said there has been times when people come forward and have been threatening and they are abusive to council, to the point where I have felt very unsafe being here. Some of these instances, said Haggard, led the city to undertake the violence, the risk assessment, which led to some of the structural changes in City Hall. I was hoping that dialogue would take place from my questions, because I do think it's a very serious thing to consider. And the opportunity was there for city council members to give input, and that just didn't happen. And when I read this in the paper, I was just thinking, well, that pretty much discounts, it's the opposite of what I was told when I asked my questions. The response I got from Mr. Fox and the brief response I got from yourself. And so, not as I should be used to it, but you ask a question here, and you don't always get the answer to your questions. So I'm very curious. I can't ask questions here, and it isn't a question at this point, is why this wasn't brought out at the meeting when I made it very clear that I was after information. And one of them was, if there's threats being made to the city staff, city council, or to the public, there's three parties involved here again, that it's something that should be talked about. I was disappointed in the fact that I read that in the paper 2 days after I talked extensively on it at the 15th meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I did just want to let you know that that comment in the paper was a direct quote of something that was said in a public council meeting. So that may not have been given to you at that specific time, but that wasn't a separate interview. It was a quote direct from a council meeting. And I just also think it's important to note that not everything is something that we can publicly discuss. And specifically when there are threats and there's an RCMP, if there are RCMP involved, then we may not be discussing that in public. So I appreciate you wanting to start a dialogue on this, but some specifics are just not going to be, are personal and are not going to be discussed in public.
You don't have to give specifics to say this is a type of threat that I'm experiencing. From what I got from that last meeting on the 15th, is that there was no specific threats that have occurred at these meetings. I do appreciate the one comment that was made to yours that you weren't talking about the podium. Someone says, not you. Well, I've sometimes lost it, other frustrations. So some of those frustrations come this way. And right now we are both, at least Mayor, you're out of order. You're not supposed to discuss the comments made at the...
Just giving you a little flexibility today, Neil.
Anyway.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who would like to speak at public input period today? Monica, come on forward.
I thought I pressed it. It's red. Oh, red is good, okay. I thought green is good. Just a comment, BC government handed last Wednesday's money, $28 million for harbor development, marine development. And I just feel that the Port Alberni should be interested in this. So it's just a note that I wanted to acknowledge. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that. We do have room for 2 more speakers. Come on forward, Dr. Lambiat.
Hi, guys. Hi there. Good afternoon. So thank you for allowing me to talk now. I'm just really giving you an update in terms of healthcare in the Valley. We recently had a Medical Staff Association meeting Thursday last week, looking at retention recruitment in Port Alberni in terms of attracting both nursing staff and physicians. We also did a survey that actually closed on the Friday, but I'll just give you the quick brief minutes in terms of what we found from the initial meeting with all the physicians there, both abroad and inside. Okay, so at this point in time, we all know that there's a health crisis, BC, provincial, Canada-wide. So, and essentially, towns are going to be competing with towns. So some of the stuff that was brought ahead is that a lot of the physicians feel that the town needs to step up in terms of attracting healthcare workers here. And what does that mean exactly? So essentially, the 2 things that were quoted was the fact of Squamish as is to Whistler, Henton as to is Jasper, and very much we fill that gap as well. Port Alberni is to Tofino, 1.5 million cars coming through here. So we would like to inform you guys that there is coming, the results of that survey are coming out. They feel that the town, its emphasis should be on tourism, mountain biking, hiking, the things that we all have in this town as revenue generation, but also in terms of getting the healthcare staff we need here. Aftercare services, childcare, which I know is a province, but this also needs to be in terms of attracting nurses. So at this point in time, staring down the barrel, we've got the likes of Fraser retiring, Muhlenberg retiring, so there will be several thousand people unattached. The health authority is trying to do the best from their side in terms of incentives, but in terms of the town and the regional district having to step up in a meaningful way to address that, especially in terms of what the town looks like. I came to understand as of this morning through a colleague of mine that the grants for improvement of facades, things like that down here on this avenue here have been pulled or paused due to money constraints. I'm not entirely sure. But these things really need to be addressed in terms of beautification of the city, in terms of, and I understand if we don't get the revenue in through these other things, we're not going to get the physicians. We're not going to get the nurses, and healthcare in the valley is going to essentially collapse. So it's going to be up to not just asking for handouts from government to help us. Locally, we're going to have to do a lot. And I know we don't want to increase tax, but if people in the community know what we're facing in terms of trying to get people bodies here, we're competing with other towns, extraordinary things have to happen. So we are looking at things to help you guys to do this, and I just hope that I've also been asked to write a letter into the press as an opinion in terms of what we need to do here to get people. So I'm just giving you the heads up that that's coming. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Lambiot. And we actually just about an hour ago wrote you down on a request list for a delegation, specifically your name, and then you just appeared here. But no, really appreciate the work that you're doing. And what we would like is to ask for you to come back, hopefully to our council meeting in 2 weeks, or possibly our committee of the whole, but very soon, because we would like to hear in more detail and have the opportunity to ask questions about what your recommendations are for what we can do. Public input period doesn't give us a ton of time or flexibility, so we'd like to have a more detailed conversation with you about this. I want you to also know, though, that our staff are working on, and we know that you're working with some of our staff, but they are bringing us reports on options, and we are not standing still. We just thought we could have more of a detailed conversation with you while we pursue some of these options.
I'll just give you one little tidbit from Rotorua in New Zealand, right? That is predominantly a forestry town. It is also a tourist town because of hot pools. But in terms of the natural beauty, they don't compared to us, they're left like way behind. They have a 300-something kilometer mountain biking thing, and they have a single little store at this beautiful Canadian cedar-made building with a shop and a mountain biking store that rents, repairs and all the rest of it. The income from that little store was 20 million New Zealand for the year. 20 million just on that little building. You can imagine what the tax revenue would be on 20 million, and that's not even accounting for the store, the accommodation, and people coming to visit. And that's your tax dollars to spend so we can alleviate the poverty here, the drug abuse, and all that to actually give robust, holistic care, to give us the money. Thank you for your time. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Dr. Lambiot. And we do have an opportunity for one more member of the public. Come on forward, Wendy.
Hello, Wendy Kerr, Port Alberni resident, long time. Sat at this table in here before somewhere. And I wasn't going to speak today, but gosh, I'm so happy to see all your wonderful faces. I thought, well, what the hell? Might as well just shoot myself in the foot. So, having followed up with Dr. Lambiot, and I am a healthcare worker. I worked all the way through COVID. I wore my mask. I loved my job, went back to school, paid a lot of money to be a seniors activity resident. And then I got thrown out of my ass. Right after my sister died from her vaccine, they told me they didn't want me to work anymore. And so now I'm a starving to death senior, and I hear people talk about, oh, the hospital, oh, it's scary. And I did go up there, try the scariness out the other day. Yeah, it appears they're short-staffed. You know what? I'd give my eye teeth to be able to work. And I go and stand on the side of the highway, or used to, with my doctor friends, my LPNs, my RNs, and we wave on the side of the highway. Political leaders tell us maybe we need to get a new hobby. This is it. This is the new hobby. You know, because I'll tell you, I think that if we're concerned about the people and the residents of Port Alberni, then we do need to be concerned about our hospital. And I know that we've been having staff problems and shortages, all of us old people coming up at the same time. We knew it was coming. But this, to get rid of 5,000 workers or however many there are in Port Alberni, maybe only 50, is a travesty. When you are having a medical emergency, you need all the tools in the toolbox. And to see my ultrasound technicians, my LPNs, my RNs, the couple doctors that I know, scrambling to find work after studying for years, I'm so disappointed. And I'm so glad that Dr. Lambiot's pushing you, but I think we need to hire all those people back that were a hero when we used to buy them coffee and bang our pots and pans. And now I am scum of the earth. So I'd like some of yous, all people, to start standing up for some of us people that are at the side of the highway. And boy, we'd love to meet with you guys sometime and just have a little chat about the way of the world. But I'd like to see all of my friends and me back at our local hospital working. And I do understand there's a mayor in Merritt who actually spoke up and shared some of my same views about let's getting those healthcare people back to work. Let's get the full team here. Because I tell you, when I hear that the hospital's short, I really don't have any pity because I think you guys are all making your own mess and no one's fault here, but no one's making it any better as far as I can tell. So thank you for letting me listen. Thank you for probably giving me 12 seconds more than my 3 minutes. I hope you have a great day. And I will be back. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, that's the end of public input period. No delegations today, so we'll move on to unfinished business. Item number 1, intersection safety improvement options for 10th Ave and Dunbar Street.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As requested, please accept this report as an update on the project for the intersection safety improvements at 10th and Dunbar. I'll start with a summary of how this project has started and where we are at today and then next steps. The project started with a call to ICBC and talk about partnering to look at our intersection safety, and that was in January of 2021. Through the next year, we worked through both that intersection study, but we also prioritized Dunbar and 10th and Redford as we had fatalities at those intersections and we knew they were going to be priorities. So at that time, we had prioritized starting those construction or the design of those projects in March of 2021 as well. Fast forward to recently in March of 2023, and we had closed the tender for construction of these 2 intersections. And the work is actually supposed to be starting June 5th and continue on into the fall. The proposed construction scope at this time is included in Council's agenda package, and it's proposed work it's proposed to be phased in phase 1 of this year would be construction as per the agenda package today. And at Dunbar and 10th, it would include curb work, line painting, signage, a pedestrian-activated flasher to cross 10th Avenue, as well as 3 new streetlights. There's only 1 existing streetlight at the northeast corner, and so now there will be a streetlight at all 4 corners. And those will provide a heck of a lot more light for folks going through that intersection, whether it be pedestrians, cyclists, or drivers. With completion of those works, the intention is then to wait until phase 2, where we would remove the left turn lane. And the reason that we would defer that work is because once we remove that left turn lane, it will push a lot of large truck traffic through the intersection of Argyle and 10th. Plus, it'll also change the dynamics of how they're going through Argyle and Anderson. And the concerns there are geometric, where we would require curb removals and replacements, drainage changes, sign relocations. There's 2 hydrants and a utility pole that would be a concern for turning vehicles. And we're in the process of looking at that and trying to make those changes so that we can phase them, make those changes as soon as possible prior to any larger upgrades to both those intersections. Because especially when we're talking about Argyle and 10th, that intersection does warrant some, as many would know, going through there at certain times of the day, there is significant congestion and there are safety concerns with the crossing distances and the impatience of some drivers. So it does warrant either a roundabout at this time or a traffic signal, which is a very expensive endeavor. And we have that coming up in the 5-year plan to do those works. We've started the design of that intersection so that we can apply for grants with a conceptual design, and hopefully ICBC is very supportive, but we would hope to find other grants from the province and federal government to support that because of that expense. In the meantime, the works we are doing make this intersection significantly safer. So not removing those left turn lanes at this time, we will, as per council's direction and our recommendation, remove the left turn lanes. The only reason we wouldn't is if we found with these improvements, because of how we're narrowing the road and making those curbs tighter, we may actually have traffic, like larger trucks, not turning here. Because now turning right from Dunbar onto 10th will be challenging for them. They'll have to slow down. And 5 times I've personally been at that intersection, twice I've seen trucks and pups pulling along Dunbar and come almost to a yield and then fly out and go along 10th. Likewise, when they're coming up 10th, and I've witnessed this myself many times, they wait for a break in traffic, which is smart, so they gear down and then they give heck to get onto Dunbar. And so this tightening will make this intersection much more safer by slowing them down and making sure they stop when they should stop and that they're coming to more of a yield when they turn left from 10th onto Dunbar. So as we track those changes, we may not require the removal of those left turn lanes. At this time, we do recommend those left turn lanes removal anyway, because we would replace them with the refuge. Where that space is in the road, we would build up the curbing, and then you would have a pedestrian being able to cross the road by going one lane, then they'd have that refuge by built up curbing as well as signage in the middle of the road, and then be able to continue across the other half of the road. I am here if there's any questions for council.
Thank you very much. That's a really helpful report. Are there any questions? Councillor Douglas and then Councillor Haggard.
Thanks, Rob. Sort of coming in here later on, so I'm not sure what was done earlier. Was there ever consideration for simply putting a stop sign for the northbound traffic on 10th Avenue and allowing the vehicles coming up the hill from the dip to simply turn left onto Dunbar without having to stop?
We definitely looked at that, our transportation engineers look at that, and when we look at 4-way stops or 3-way stops, there needs to be a warrant process for a transportation engineer to make that recommendation. It's based on traffic volumes, speeds, as well as the difference in flow of traffic. So if you have a major arterial like 10th, and you have a minor connector like Dunbar, putting a 4-way stop there, what can happen is folks on 10th stopping will realize 9 times out of 10 there's no car on Dunbar, so then they stop stopping and they start yielding because they're like, well, it's a stop sign, but it shouldn't be here. I never see a car. And then you see T-bones occur, and those do end up with larger injuries as well as potential fatalities. And in this particular location, just with the slope of 10th Avenue and the speeds, we have clocked, I think, one person at 100, I think I said here, 162 kilometers an hour it was going through the dip. And since bringing that up here, incidentally, the RCMP have been there many times doing enforcement, so thank you very much. And so we wouldn't want to put a stop sign here because we would actually make it more dangerous.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I don't want to put pedestrian safety thinking it's more important than trucks, but it has been expressed to me some concern that, especially in the winter, if the roads are a little bit icy or snowy or slushy, that if they're going through that bit of a hill, through the dip, and they have to go up that bit of a hill and stop, there could be issues that way. Have you thought about that and how that can be remedied for the trucking industry?
We definitely have, in that this is a priority. The dip is one of our top 5 priorities for snow removal as well as sanding, and so we try to get to it as soon as we can, as well as emergency services. And with the change proposed in the future with trucks going up the roads to 10th and Argyle, one of the things we're looking at is the grade there, where it is right at the intersection. It's a lot more gentle than this intersection, but we're trying to look at how we can extend that to the north. So for instance, if there's 8 cars lined up and then there's a big truck, they're not at where that slope starts getting steep, which is one of the reasons when we analyze this through our transportation engineer, they recommended a roundabout, because then the truck drivers can do what they do here, which is slow down coming up, wait till someone clears the roundabout and then put it in a gear and go through it type of thing.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, this report is just for information. Would somebody like to move receipt? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. All in favor? Carried. Thanks. And thanks for the report. Then staff reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated May 23rd, 2023 be received and checks numbered 152741 to 152810 inclusive in payment of accounts totaling $749,607.62 be approved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. On to bylaws. Item number 1, the building bylaw number 5077, 2023. Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So before you is the city's new building bylaw for consideration of 3 readings. The current city building bylaw was adopted in 2006 and has been consolidated up to 2016. That being said, there's been a significant number of updates to the building code and introduction of the step code since that time. So this new building bylaw in consultation with the new model that was created province-wide has been prepared for council's consideration. In addition, we've done some research on similar-sized city, including the ACRD, on our fee review, as our fees have not been changed since 2006. This building bylaw did come to the committee of the whole meeting, and the committee did recommend to council that they consider 3 readings of this bylaw. Just to give you a bit of idea on the fees, there's basically a comparative chart for what single-family, couple values of single-family homes would be from our current fees to our existing. And also there's a table attached that kind of shows a comparative to other neighboring local governments, including the ACRD. Our current fees, although at the very beginning look fairly competitive, but as you can see, once a building permit gets over 500,000, which is pretty a lot, most things these days, except for some minor renovations, our fees go from $6 per thousand down to $2.25, and that's where the biggest change is occurring. Is like the more expensive the fees, the cheaper they got in our current fee. We're proposing a flat rate of $7 per thousand. The ACRD is very similar to that. They start with $7 per thousand and then drop down to $6 where it's over 500,000. Whereas Nanaimo starts at $10 per thousand and then drops down to $7. So we've been looked at these fees to be consistent with what other local fees are being charged in the area. This is an administrative bylaw, so not requiring a public hearing. That's why it's on council's agenda for 3 readings. The committee of the whole did not direct for us to consult with the building industry, although this is certainly a public process, and the bylaw will come into effect once adopted by council. Staff are recommending council consider 3 readings, as this covers updates to the building code, the building permit fees align with other local government jurisdictions to cover administrative costs, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In your report, Scott, you said that in November of last year, you had a meeting with other approximately 70 people in the industry. What kind of feedback did you get from them about the proposed changes? Were they supportive, or did you get any other comments, or?
So that November meeting was specifically around the province's step code coming in. So it was really a good meeting for when we partnered with the regional district and an energy step provider to have local builders, suppliers be aware of the province implementing the STEP code requirements that came into effect on May 1st, province-wide. And so it was much as anything to demonstrate to our local builders, here's what's coming down the pipes, here's what you're going to have to meet. Here's different ways to go about meeting those new requirements. So I think it was well received, and we did develop a pretty good connection list with our industry. So I think as things like that move forward, we would probably do that again in partnership with the regional district, because I think it was quite helpful.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question for Mr. Smith is, we have a lot of construction going on right now in our community. So would any of these fees be retroactive? Because, or if they're, hey, I got to try.
No, the fees are not retroactive until they're not retroactive, no.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, Councillor Mealy, would you like to read these?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that building bylaw number 5077-2023 be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that building bylaw number 5077-2023 be read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that building bylaw number 5077-2023 be now read a third time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Patola. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to item number 2, OCP and zoning bylaw amendment for 2601 Bird Street.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As mentioned, this is an application at 2601 Bird Street for OCP and zoning bylaw amendments, specifically amending bylaw 5070 and amending bylaw 5071. So the intent of this application is to change the land use of the property to enable a subdivision for a total of 5 lots, with the intent of eventually constructing a total of 5 single detached houses. And OCP Amendment Bylaw 5070 proposes to change the land use from future residential to residential. And Zoning Amendment Bylaw 5071 proposes to change the land use zone from future development to RR2 semi-rural residential. Here's a picture of the property. It is on the intersection of Bird Street and Dundalk Avenue at the ACRD boundary. And on the right, you see a proposed site plan showing the 5 lots. The application was reviewed by the Advisory Planning Commission back in October 2022. Council gave first and second readings in March of 2023 at their regular meeting. Public hearing was held on April 24th, and now the application is up for consideration once again, a third reading and final adoption. The proposed land use, as I mentioned, was residential, and staff recommend that a neighborhood plan not be required, as the development is low density and aligns with the intent of the official community plan. The proposed zone, RR2 semi-rural residential, is a low density zone, and it is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The public hearing from April 24th, 2023, we mailed 74 letters to surrounding properties, received 10 letters in support, and of course that was in fulfilling the public hearing notice requirements of the Local Government Act. At that meeting, there were no members of the public in attendance who spoke. So the options for council are to give third reading to official community plan bylaw 5070, to give third reading to zoning map amendment bylaw 5071, and then to give final readings to those bylaws for adoption. Or council may decline to give third reading, or council may provide alternate direction. Staff's recommendation is that amending bylaw 5070 be given third reading, that amending bylaw 5071 be given third reading, and that both those bylaws then be finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer and numbered. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions from council? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Dane, would you like to read these?
Of course. I would move that official community plan amendment number 40 for 2601 Bird Street, ERG, bylaw number 5070 be read a third time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Solda. Any questions, comments? Seeing none. On the motion, all in favor? Carried.
I move that zoning map amendment number 58 for 2601 Birch Street -erg, bylaw number 5071 be read a third time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments. On the motion, all in favor? Carried.
I move that official community plan amendment number 40 for 2601 Birch Street -erg, bylaw number 5070 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and numbered 5070.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments. On the motion, all in favor? Carried.
And I move that zoning map amendment number 58 for 2601 Birch Street -erg, bylaw number 5071 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and numbered 5071.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. No correspondence for action, no proclamations. Move on to correspondence for information, and I'll go to our corporate officer just to summarize the correspondence we've received.
Madam Mayor, there is no correspondence today.
Thank you. So we do have just the one piece included in our agenda. Are there any comments or questions on it? Seeing none, it is there for information. On to report from in camera, and we have 2 items to release. So the first one is a motion that council release for public consumption its intent to provide a letter of support to the Sechot First Nation to add properties to their reserve land. And the second was that council release for public consumption notice of its intent to lease Unit 11 to C. Coots for the operation of Harbor Scoop, and Unit 12 to J. Wang for the operation of Turtle Island Fish and Chips Shop at the Alberni Harbor Quay for a 5-year term. So those are just released for information from in camera. Moving on to council reports. We do have a late item here, which is a thorough report from Councillor Haggard, so thank you so much for that. Are there any items from that report councillors would like to ask questions of, or any items councillors would like to highlight of their own activities? Okay. Seeing none, would somebody like to move receipt of council reports? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. And on to new business. Item number 1 is 2022 surplus funds, a notice of motion provided by Councillor Solda. I will pass that over.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to move that the council direct staff to allocate the 2022 surplus between the RCMP and Parks and Recreation and Heritage Reserves.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Are there questions specific to this? Oh, Councillor Solda, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Do we have a total amount of what was left in the reserves?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask that, and if there's, I guess as well, maybe a highlight of what our typical process is with reserves and when that would come to council and how it's typically allocated.
Thank you, and through the chair, I don't have any better number than Andrew provided at the last meeting. However, I do have on the June 12th meeting, the Deputy Director of Finance is bringing all the reserves forward with some changes in what's in each funding. And I believe at that time, that would be a really good time to look at your notice of motion and deal with it at that meeting.
Councillor Solda.
So we don't have a total of the surplus. We should have a total of the surplus that's left, shouldn't we?
Sorry, I don't have that on me at this time, but I'm sure for finances has it. I know Andrew provided a rough one at the last meeting, but that's all I have at this time.
Okay, so Madam Mayor, my motion still stands.
Thank you. So I was going to ask that we do one of two things. I guess basically they're effectively the same. And ideally defer this to our next meeting where we could get the full amount of the surplus so we know how much funds we're talking about. And then specifically as well that we bring this with information on the reserve so that we can look at a breakdown of all of the information, all of the reserves that we do have before we just pick two specifically, because I'd like to know personally more on amounts of what's in them and kind of what the needs are. The other option that I would suggest as a possibility is not that we direct staff to allocate these funds split, but that we ask for a report on kind of how much the funds are and what allocating them, where they would normally go, because I believe they typically go to just our general reserve. But I think it might effectively achieve the same if we review this motion at the same time as the reserves report, where we can get a broader kind of picture of where all of the reserves are at. So at the end of the day, these are our reserves. We can move it into the RCMP and Parks and Heritage Reserve Fund and move them out if we want to at some point. We could move it into the general reserve and move it into either of these at some point. I just personally think it makes sense to do it when we have the reserves report in front of us and an actual number of what we're talking about. Councillor Solda.
But Madam Mayor, I beg to differ because we were expecting a report, and I look at it, the money that was left in the surplus came from Parks and Rec because it was projects that weren't done. I believe that, if that's correct. And the RCMP is, we have a building that we're still, for the community policing, money's coming out of that, and the fund is going down, and I just think that Parks and Rec has a lot of issues regarding their fields and other things that are happening at Parks and Rec, like I'm talking about, we have buildings that we need to upkeep as well as we do in other, as we do in other areas of our city. So, and there's parks that have to be, some of the parks are aging, and I just believe that the money will be well served in those two particular areas through the RCMP and the Parks and Recreation. It's not like we haven't tapped in before, and I just still stay with my motion being on the floor. Somebody can defer it, but I will not vote in favor of that.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do think that this is a important motion, and the two designated funds are both important recipients. Although it should be no surprise that I am always in favor of more information, and I have been struggling to understand where the surplus comes from and how it gets then reallocated. So I would very much like to have that report. I'm not sure. I understand it's coming June 12th, so I kind of expected it earlier too, but that's what happens. And I'm also would say that I'm going to be influenced by the Parks report that is supposed to be coming. And I'm not sure when that is, because that would certainly outline for myself in making a decision much more information as to where Parks hasn't spent money, where the surplus comes from, why they haven't spent money, and how much money they should be reallocated. So I guess my question, Madam Mayor, through you, to the CAO is if we know when the Parks report is coming, for lack of a better term.
Thank you, we do. CAO.
Through the chair, it's coming to the June COW meeting, or Committee of the Whole meeting.
Thank you. I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of commonality in how we would like to assign reserve funds. And we have a lot of shared priorities here as well in some of the projects that have been identified. I'm certainly not bothered if we do direct the reserve funds to these two reserves. I just personally, without a report, don't even know how much reserve funds we're talking about. So I would rather we wait until we have all of the information in front of us, but it's not harmful if we don't, because we can always reassign reserves and move things around. These are not statutory reserves, they're our own reserves, so we have lots of flexibility if we want to assign them from one project to another down the road. So I guess I'm saying either way, fine with me. Councillor Haggard.
I'm not against the motion, Madam Mayor, but I prefer to wait until I found out exactly what the reserve, how much is going to be in our excess surplus.
Thank you. Councillor Patola and then Councillor Dame. Councillor Patola, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to ask, would it now then be appropriate to move to table the motion? Is that
I think we could move to defer it to And so it sounds to me, I just want to clarify, it sounds to me like we have two different reports coming forward to two different meetings. The June 12th council meeting is our reserves report coming forward. That one has previously been to a committee of the whole and been discussed. And then the June committee of the whole meeting, which I think is the first, I think that's before the cow, or before the June 12th meeting, or after?
Through the chair, it's June 19th.
Okay, then that one's following. And so we might want to defer it to possibly the second regular meeting of council of June so that we've received the reserves report as well as had the discussion on Parks and Rec master plan and fields and all of that.
Sure. Well, in that case, I would like to go ahead and move that we defer the motion until we receive the, well, that would be the second regular meeting of June.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. And Councillor Patola had a comment?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments here? Okay. Councillor Mealy.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, it's not on the deferral, but it's on the original motion. I was just going to say that I support the original motion, as I believe we sat here and talked about the RCMP upcoming amount of money that we'll be needing, and parks. It just seemed like common sense that we would do it. I understand, totally understand with getting more information. But I just feel it's not going to change how we're going to do things. But fair enough if the council wants to defer, of course.
Okay. Thank you. So on the motion to defer then, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So the motion will come as written to the second meeting in June. And item number 2, bylaw enforcement, notice of motion. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am not going to proceed with raising this motion today, although I will certainly do so in the future. I noted with great interest, Madam Mayor, your remarks concerning previous discussions on this issue, and that there were previous discussions. I think I will, in private or at another time, ask you to clarify where those discussions were so I can find them. I would like to research those discussions, whether there was a motion made or not, and for what reason it did or did not proceed, as a basis for the motion that I will bring to review the bylaws, but I just want to put it in an appropriate context. Thank you.
Wonderful. We can definitely, I can give you my memory of the history on that. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, we have the 2023 to 2027 financial plan amendment for garbage trucks and water meters. Who is speaking to this?
Thank you, and through the chair, I believe we've had quite a bit of discussion and on these two items when it came forward. I'm more than happy to answer questions. One is about the garbage truck and the type of garbage trucks we buy. This is the amount of money we need to purchase the truck to move forward with that. And the water meters, we had quite an in-depth conversation at a CAL meeting and I believe another council meeting as well on the water meters. If there's any further questions, I'll try and answer them to the best of my ability.
Questions from council? Councillor Solda.
If I turn it on, there we go. So we're asking for $523,940 to replace the Freightliner garbage truck. It's an increase from the funding that was allocated. Are we asking for more money than, I'm sorry, I did not look it up. So are we asking for more, an increase on the budget? And if so, why? And yeah, that'll start.
Thank you, CAO.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. There is an increase on this amount than the previous one that we had discussed because it didn't include GST. So it is more, and the increase was the GST that wasn't in the past report.
Thank you, Councillor Solda.
So we do get the GST back, don't we? What do we get back from the government? Do we get anything back, or is that not a question for yourself?
Through the chair, I know we get a percentage of back, but I couldn't tell you what that is off the top of my head.
And Madam Mayor, okay, so I believe we get some of the GST back, but again, I don't know how much. And the other question is 2023 water meter renewal. So are we asking for more money, or is it just coming by adding funding allocation? Can I have that clarified?
Yeah, through the chair, the 300,000 was already allocated. It just wasn't put in the financial plan as an amendment. It was taken out when we were. I'm trying to come up with exactly how we had the funding that was left over was the 300,000 from last year. It wasn't put in the financial plan directly towards water meters. So the CFO decided he wanted it in there as 300,000 for water meters. It was around the discussions we had. I believe it was missed when it was brought forward last time.
So you're just going to love me on this. So my question is, so the $300,000 is in, we're not taxing the community, it's already there.
Yeah, through the chair, that is correct. It is it just wasn't allocated to the water meters, but it was in the discussions and the intent, but it just wasn't brought forward at that time. So it is not a tax increase. It was in the original budget amount.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the motions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council amend the City of Port Alberni 2023 to 2027 Financial Plan Bylaw Number 5075-2023 Capital Plan to increase the funding allocation for replace 2018 Freightliner garbage truck number 401 to $523,940 coming from the Equipment Replacement Reserve Fund.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
I'd like to move that council amend the City of Port Alberni 2023 to 2027 Financial Plan Bylaw Number 5075-2023 by adding the funding allocation for 2023 water meter renewal to $300,000 coming from the Water Fund Reserve.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item number 4, manufacturer license new outdoor patio application for Alberni Brewing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So Alberni Brewing Company has applied to the Liquor Control Licensing Branch to add some new patio space, outdoor patio space, to their manufacturing license. Council is required to consider the location of the establishment, person capacity, hours of service, and provide a resolution in regards to the application. So the proposed, the property is zoned C7, our commercial downtown zone. The proposed area is a little over 830 square feet of new outdoor patio space on the southern side of the property next to the new Coastal Credit Union parking lot, and adjacent to an existing patio space they already have. The patio addition would provide for a proposed 64-person capacity. However, new patio space cannot be used to increase the overall occupancy load of the business, which would remain at 139 persons. Staff have done a review and are recommending council provide a recommendation or a resolution in support of this new patio space, as the general impacts to the community is expected to be positive. Any additional noise from the potential patio is expected to not greatly alter the commercial area, and the city has received no letters of opposition in response to a notice for public comment, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Mealy.
If I may make the motion, Madam Mayor, then. Move that council for the City of Port Alberni support the manufacturer licensed new outdoor patio application for Alberni Brewing Company operating at 4630 Adelaide Street and endorse the comments and reasons for support as provided in the report from city staff dated May 12, 2023.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Patola. Not seeing any comments on the motion. Oh,
No, just to reiterate that the public input was out there, and there was one letter of correspondence in support, and that was it, so.
thank you. Okay, seeing no other comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And item number 5, Complete Communities 2023-2024 grant application. We'll go to our CAO just for an overview on this.
Thank you. And through the chair, in this grant, there are 2 intakes. One is coming up very quickly and one is in the fall. Our economic development officer has application ready that we have previously applied for grant funding and is wanting to put that forward. And it's one of the 3 projects listed in the report. I think it's a good opportunity to leverage some grant funding to move us forward on some design project, design criteria, and staffing to do public input.
Thank you very much. Any questions on this? Okay, Councillor Patola, would you read this motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that council authorize staff to prepare and submit an application for funding to the June 16th, 2023 intake of the Complete Communities Program for $150,000 to prepare and assess a core area of the city for infrastructure improvements, develop an implementation plan for those improvements, and hire an individual for up to a 1-year term to do the work.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Patola, seconded by Councillor Haggard. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And item number 6, we have the purchase card policy 3009-3. This was discussed at our last committee of the whole meeting, so we're all familiar. Are there any questions or comments on this of staff? Okay, Councillor Douglas, would you like to read this?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion that council rescind credit card policy dated October 14th, 2014, and approve policy 3009-3 purchase card policy.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Solda. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And item number 7, travel policy 3009-2, and this was discussed as well at the committee of the whole. Councillor Mealy, would you like to read this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council rescind P6 travel expense policy for employees and other authorized persons dated March 9th, 2015, and approve policy 300-9-2 travel policy.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dame. Any comments on this one? Okay, seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And that is the end of our new business, so we'll move on to question period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council. Would anyone like to ask questions today? Mr. Anderson.
That from the council meetings. And I do. I made some comments regarding the article in the paper, and I think it's only fair to give, through the chair, Councillor Haggard, an opportunity to respond to a couple of questions that come from this article, if I may. And the first is, Councillor Haggard said that in the past, members of the public have abused the public input period. There have been matters where the public have based the public input period to try and move forward their political agendas. That leaves it so open to political agendas. That's what we're entitled to do. So through the chair, could you just clarify that, Councillor Haggard, as to what you meant? And if I say examples, I understand why at times you can't give names, but you can bring up issues such as Mr. Fox had done at the 15th meeting as to what kind of concerns you're not comfortable with. So through yourself, can.
Thank you, Councillor Haggard, if you would like to respond.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to have permission to respond. During COVID, there was a large group of people who had attended council meetings They were anti-maskers, they were anti-vaxxers, they refused to wear your mask at the time when there was a provincial mandate to wear a mask. But it's up to them not to get vaccinated, that's totally up to them. And they came here and just kind of took over the meeting and trying to get us to overturn a provincial mandate, which we do not have the authority to do. So that's what I meant by they were trying to proceed with their political agenda.
So, and I remember that incident, and
There was more than one incident of them coming.
okay, so these are isolated incidents, so? I remember the one you're referring to.
Yeah, they came a few times. They came more than once.
Okay. Did I miss a meeting? No. And the other part, there has been, where people have used the public input period to try to move forward their political agendas. Well, anytime someone comes out and maybe disagrees with a policy or a practice can be considered a political agenda. It's the natural thing for people to come up and say, look, I don't agree for this reasons, and you can turn it into that. So could you explain it through the chair, could you explain what you mean pushing forward political agendas?
That's what I tried to explain. There was a group of people during COVID who did not agree with the provincial mandate of wearing masks. And the city had a mandate, a rule that if you came into council chambers, you had to wear a mask. They refused to wear the mask, but they wanted to proceed with what they believed at that time and wanted council to overturn a provincial mandate, which we did not have the authority to do.
Yes, but I guess I understand what you're saying. I guess what I'm saying is when you print this in a paper, the readers look at that as covering a lot more than a couple, 3 incidents. I'm not saying that they're not important. And so it implies that many people come forward and use the public input period in the fashion that it was never meant to be. And so that's
Mr.
going out.
Anderson, I think that Councillor Haggard is clarifying that that is not what she meant, that she is not intending to suggest that everyone coming forward or frequently people are coming forward and trying to advance political agendas. I think she's clarified twice now that she was speaking to a specific incidents in council, and that may have been, I think it was
And
3
the point-
meetings.
and the point of-
But she is speaking to a specific topic, so I'm
I know
because
what
you've
you're
asked her
trying to
twice
do,
now,
yeah.
I don't think we need to ask her a third time.
Well, that's, again, this is public input period. What I'm trying to make. Question in period, which I didn't have to come back and give her the chance to respond. It's the message that's going out to almost every household that this is a practice that is being utilized by the general public at different times. Not that there's a few incidents. You're covering almost anyone that comes up and maybe appears in some opinions to be pushing a political agenda. Anyway, just make sure I got the last one here.
I think we just have a comment from Councillor Mealy.
Pardon me?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Oh, sorry, Mr. Anderson, I apologize.
No, you go
May I
ahead.
comment? I appreciate that.
Yes, of course you can.
So I'm just going to comment on the policy and the reason why, from my point of view. So I was a counselor before COVID, counselor after COVID. I wasn't here during COVID, but obviously there were some trying times. Before, we used to have the inspector of the RCMP sitting right next to me for 9 years. And it seemed to be just to have the person there was enough to ensure that nothing went wrong and that. I think the reason why I supported the changes for security is it's not up to staff to be security in this room. And I'm not saying there's a need for, however, I have seen one person already in my meetings, been very irate, and it made me question whether or not the person would do something else. It is not up to staff to protect us, so it is up to us to do things to make sure that we are protected in any event. That also includes the staff at the front. You can walk up there, there's glass there, but anybody could hop over those railings and run around in the back. That's not secure. It's open for our community. It's nice that someone can come up and have an interaction. I like that. But there is other steps that need to be taken just to ensure that the staff here at City Hall are taken care of and that everyone's safe, but also to allow the public input that we still have today.
I'm not questioning what you're saying. I think there has to be precautions taken. I agree to that, and that's where the conversation ended on the 15th, that being prepared is better than waiting for something to happen. I just wish that this discussion we're having right now came out at that time when I gave the opportunity to everyone to speak on it, not in the paper in this manner. The people reading this, and I'm finished before I'm cut off again, is the people in the public aren't reading what we're hearing now. And that, I think, was wrong and unfair. Anyway, thank you for my time.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who would like to ask questions? Mr. Fraser.
Randy Fraser, Oxford Street, Port Alberni. I just looking for some updates. Last year, there was an RFP tender out for the train station. I haven't seen, maybe I've missed it, updates of where we are with that.
Are you referring to the request for
Yes.
expression of interest
That's
for a
correct.
tenant for the train station? We are currently in negotiations with a preferred tenant. So as soon as we've completed our negotiations, we will publicly release the results
Okay, I was
of
just
that.
wondering, because that was like 10 months ago.
It was, yes.
Yeah, okay. And my, secondly, I'll try not to ramble on too much, but January, I wrote council with some photos of overgrown trails, and more specifically about the dike tripping hazards. And nothing has been done to the dike. Recently, there's some spray paint out there. So, and I know you're talking about some parks reports coming, and so I'm sort of lost track how many reports are coming. Is that report going to cover the dike, just ball fields, trails? Like, what's the condition of the ball fields? Is there going to be a plan to do some work on the dike this year?
Thank you for that. I recall when you wrote that letter, we did refer that to Parks and Rec for the work to be completed. So I'm not sure if our CAO would have an update on that or not. And if not, that's fine. We can get that information at the next meeting. But if you could speak to the what is intended to be coming to the committee of the whole.
Through the chair, I believe that the parks report is going to. There's been several direction towards parks, and I believe it's encompassing all of that direction in that report to be discussed, and that includes the ball fields and some other things in parks. As far as the trail on the dike, I've heard recently of some plans for making improvements, and I know that there was coordinated walk on there to talk about some of the trip hazards, et cetera. I don't have an updated timeline on when they will be corrected, though.
Thank you.
Yeah, because over the years, you know, I think they do annual inspections. There's been a lot of spray paint on there, but nothing's happened, so I look forward to seeing what happens. And the other thing, to connect the trails pathway, that tender closed a month ago. Is there any updates on that work?
There's not an update yet. CAO, if there's any information that can be added.
Yeah, through the chair, the RFP closed, and we're working with the consultant and the proponent to bring it in at where we're trying to get to. I guess that's the easiest way. Where every time an RFP closes, we have the opportunity to work with the proponent.
Correct. Yeah, depending on the bid you got, right?
Correct.
Might be a little higher than you expected, type of thing. Need some adjustments, right? Yeah, my only other comment I had, and this is a comment maybe out of turn, but the public, I don't think we get a lot of updates of what's going on within the city, right? What roads construction is happening. I didn't know 7th Avenue was happening, unless you get into the details of the budget or things that are announced and stuff. A lot of that stuff should be brought forward to the public, unless you're a little detailed guy that looks at the actual financial details. You don't know what's really going on in the city. So I think more communication would be better from my perspective, and probably for your guys' benefit too.
I think that's a great opportunity for our CAO to speak to our communications position.
Thank you, and through the chairs, we do have a new communications position, and with the release of the strategic plan, we are going to be doing a now, next, later as administration, so we'll have the list of the projects that we're working on now with estimated start dates, finish dates, and other comments. And then what we'll be working on after that's completed, and then the ones that are sort of in the wait list. And hopefully we'll have that up and live on the website soon. So
Right.
we are working on the completion of that and the rollout.
Yeah, because it seems every time somebody asks something, well, we'll get a report, and then reports turn into studies, and then they turn into master plans, and then we never hear anything. So I just think better communication would be better. Thank you.
Thank you. And the woman at the back, you're welcome to come forward.
Hello, Charlene, Port Alberni, Cherry Creek area. I was just wondering, did you find out why there's fluoride in the city water? I asked that query there last week.
Thank you. I'll go to our CAO.
Yeah, thank you for the question through the chair. In the city of Port Alberni's drinking water, there is small amounts of naturally occurring fluoride. The city does not add any fluoride into the water, and it is well below the health standards set out by the water authorities.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really did want to know that. Even though it's a small amount, it's still an amount which is not really good for us. I am confused with the committee of the whole meeting and the city council meeting, because I was on the understanding that you couldn't ask queries during the city council meetings, and that's why you started the committee of the whole. But there's still a question period. So could you clarify that for me, please?
Absolutely. So one important note is that we are in the process of changing our procedures bylaw, which governs how we run our meetings and when we have what happens in order of what in meetings. So those changes have been discussed, we have not completed passing those yet. So there will be some shifts coming forward. However, where there's a committee of the whole meeting once a month, that is intended to be a more formal opportunity for items that are earlier on in the process to come to council, to have a longer discussion, to give opportunities for the public to bring input to those items, to ask questions of those items, and then council will refer them to, or they will come forward to a council meeting. So there's time in between there for the public to have discussion. Council might ask for more information. We might bring it back to another committee of the whole meeting. When it comes to a committee or to a formal council meeting, that's where we actually make decisions on something. The intent of the two different types of meetings is that council meetings can be more formal, committee of the whole meetings can be more informal, where we can welcome more input from the public. Committee of the whole meetings, we do not make decisions, we make recommendations to council. So it does slow that process down, and it gives the opportunity for members of the public to have the time to give input, both at the committee of the whole level as well as in between committee of the whole and council meetings before council makes formal decisions.
Thank you very much for that. It clarifies lots. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other members of the public like to ask questions today? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Meeting adjourned.